Welcome to the Larson Health Podcast, where we bridge the gap between wellness, mindset, and empowered living. I'm your host, Kim Larson, founder of LarsonHealthWeightLoss.com. And today's episode is about community transformation, how the places we live shape our health, mindset, and future opportunities. My guest today is Sam Bailey. He's a strategic initiatives manager at the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. And since 2022, Sam has been leading projects that focus on talent retention, economic growth, and educational programs across Northern Michigan. As an extension educator for Michigan State University, Sam is passionate about strengthening communities through data driven strategies, partnerships, and innovative solutions that support both individual well being and regional vitality. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sam, take us back to your journey. What inspired you to focus on economic development and community vitality in Northern Michigan?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I kind of just stumbled into it, honestly. So I graduated, I was born and raised here. So I graduated from Harbor Springs High School back in 2017 and then went away to college. Graduated from college in 2021, which was not a great time to try and find a
Okay.
job. Uh, the joys of pandemic funness. So stumbled into an internship locally with the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. And I studied political science and economics in college. So economic development kind of bridges those two. And it was a way to have a positive impact on the community that I grew up in. So I hadn't really heard of the organization before, but stumbled into this internship and then rolled that into full time and now in the joint role where I'm shared between the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance and MSU Extension. So wasn't a grand plan that I sought out, but kind of stumbled into it and then found it kind of really fit what I was interested in and what I value.
Cool. That sounds like a great opportunity after going through COVID, right?
Hmm.
So, how do you see the connection between the community health and economic growth?
There is a lot. Some of the clear stuff is, better health outcomes for higher income individuals. So if you have a higher income, you're able to, whether it's, afford healthier food or a gym membership, or, if your job offers you health insurance and has different kind of health benefits, both physical and mental. So there's the dollar sign kind of associated with economic opportunity and then health outcomes as well. But for community health at large, it's also important to have a significant portion of individuals in your community on private health insurance because Medicare, Medicaid kind of reimburses at or below cost.
Okay.
So if you look at Sheboygan County, for example, if you go back to the early 2000s, I could show you the declining manufacturing jobs in the county, which are year-round, higher paying, offer benefits.
Okay.
And I want to say it was around 2011, 2012 that the hospital in Sheboygan changed from an inpatient to an outpatient facility. So I'm not a healthcare admin person. I'm not going to say that was the sole decision that, in factor that influenced their decision, but the payer mix in the county was changing. So they
Okay.
had less of that private insurance to support their healthcare. So then you have the healthcare facility in town shut down and kind of the ripple out of that. So there's a lot of connections between economic opportunity, jobs, healthcare, or jobs and healthcare insurance, and how that supports the overall healthcare of a community or health of a community.
I bet. Wow, that's amazing to hear that. So, can you share like a pivotal moment or project that showed you how small initiatives can create lasting impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. A small initiative at lasting impact. I guess
Or
I'll
just
toot.
like a pivotal moment or a project that showed you.
Yeah, I think um, in rural communities we are, I'm going to say, information and data starved a little bit. We can talk about shifting media and kind of the decline of local media, but Also, like I spend all the time in the data. So if you're in a metropolitan statistical area, which is what the federal government uses, if you're in a big area, they might release the estimates for employment and how many residents and all that data. They release that a lot quicker than rural areas. It's just because we have
Okay.
less people. There's different sampling.
Sure.
So, but it also means we are often, I'm going to say, driving blind a little bit, or driving while just looking out of the rearview mirror, because oftentimes data releases are coming a year or more after the time has passed. But in my role, especially when I started as an intern, my responsibility is to stay on top of all this data and then get it out into the community. And so I think anytime I get in front of a group, whether it's county commissioners, whether it's our own educational programming, and I start to put numbers to what's they're actually experiencing in their community, because oftentimes, we hear, well, okay, my friend Jim says this, or Susie says that about what's happening, but I can kind of come in and, numbers aren't perfectly objective, but I can come in and say, actually, this is how our population is changing. This is how our labor force is changing. This is which industries are growing and shrinking. And to see the conversation that sparks from that, and
Yeah.
how people kind of sit up a little more and lean in and go, okay, but what about this? Or what does that mean for our community? So I don't think it's necessarily like a lasting impact, but it's always really rewarding to see people kind of engage in that conversation and walk away with a fuller understanding of their community.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see what, we can all talk about it, but when you actually have the numbers to back it up and understand truly what is happening, it's amazing the changes that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, what challenges and opportunities have you seen when it comes to maybe attracting and retaining talent in rural communities? Because you have these businesses that you're losing. So how do you build them up?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of start with the challenge side of things. So, locally, or in cultural discussions, you might hear that no one wants to work anymore. That's kind of a phrase that goes around. Um, but in reality, there's just less people to work. So on the challenge side of things, we have these large cultural demographic shifts in our country. So you have the baby boomers, who are the largest generation in U.S. history, who are aging out of the workforce. And since then, we've had a cultural shift in the US to smaller families.
Okay.
So my mom's one of 7 siblings, my dad's one of 6.
Wow.
I'm one of 3.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in a couple generations, we've had this cultural shift towards smaller families. So kind of the reality of it is we're not raising our next generation of workforce locally. So we kind of have a couple different options. We can make our existing workers more efficient through technology and innovation. We can increase labor force participation. And so there's some businesses doing interesting stuff like that, to, more flexible scheduling for people who don't want to fully retire but still want to work a little bit.
Yeah.
Engaging overlooked communities, like people who are in recovery from substance abuse issues. So there's different ways to engage to increase labor force participation. But the other way is then to attract more people into your community. So that's kind of the challenge side of it. And then one other challenge I would add is, in our area, there is a bit of there's a narrative challenge, I'm going to say. So locally, for some people, there's this idea that you have to go away for opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we don't have a 4-year university in our community, and that's a reality. I went away to college, and some people are going to do that. But there's also the idea for economic opportunity that, oh, there's not jobs here, there's not whatever here, you got to go away. Externally, there's a perception that we're the place you visit, we're not the place you live. So that's the place you go in the summer, but it's all hospitality jobs, it's all tourism jobs. In reality, how 15, I think it's 15%, 15 to 17% of the private sector jobs in our community are in manufacturing. So we have, high skilled engineers and designers, doing really impressive work, but that doesn't fit the narrative of our area. So on the challenges side, we have kind of the demographic challenge. And
Mhm.
then we also have that kind of narrative challenge about how people perceive our community. So with a very long answer to the challenge side, To talk about opportunities, there really is a lot. Recent data shows that rural communities across the country have actually experienced growth out of COVID, coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
And a lot of that growth is stemming from younger workers, so 18 to 34, which is surprising because historically, if you look at migration literature, it's all young people go to urban centers, older folks move into rural communities. So there's a bit of this flip of the script that we don't exactly have like a reason for right now,
Yeah.
but it's a promising sign.
But
Um,
where do they afford the housing? I mean, right? So a lot of these people, can they find a job that's going to pay them enough to find the housing that they need? And I can tell you that there's ageism here. When I'm looking for a new role to go back into sales, I can't find a job.
Yeah, there's definitely that for sure. So there's the housing aspect of it, especially in our area, but it's also kind of relative. One of the guys that I play soccer with that moved here, moved from San Francisco. He's like, "Yeah, housing's affordable here," and I'm looking at him going, "What are you talking
Yeah, compared to
about?"
California. Yeah.
Yeah, so compared to living in San Francisco, yes, housing's absolutely affordable here. So part of it, so that was rural communities at large. I was kind of talking about. So in our area, yes, we are particularly challenged with housing. There are a number of housing developments, workforce housing developments coming online in the next couple of years. So you have Bel Air Lofts down in Bel Air, the Maple Block development and Lofts on Lumber Square in Petoskey. The Tribe is doing housing development kind of up on the hill in Petoskey. Habitat up towards Lansing is doing that large neighborhood, Habitat for Humanity. So we do have units coming online. It's just not as much as
Give me some time.
we would like. Um, but going back to the opportunities for rural areas, especially coming out of COVID, I think there's been an increased importance that people place in access to outdoors and natural amenities. So there's this department at the state called the Michigan Growth Office. They Michigan has some concerning demographic trends, and so this office has kind of been tasked with digging into that and providing solutions. So they surveyed 6,000 folks, 18 to 34, in metropolitan areas around the U.S. So big, New York City, Chicago, Houston, like big areas,
Los Angeles. Yeah.
and over 80% of those folks placed access to nature and access to outdoor recreation in their top three considerations when looking for a place to live.
Yeah.
So, rural communities in general, that's a plus, but especially for us, our region, who's able to offer year round outdoor recreation from getting on the water to mountain biking and hiking in the summer. I'm a downhill skier, but if you snowshoe, cross country ski,
Yeah.
anything like that,
Snowmobiling. Yeah.
yep, we're really able to offer a wide range
Yeah.
of outdoor opportunities, and so I think that's a really an opportunity for our area to lean into and really highlight that the whole live work play thing. Great place to live. We do have the jobs and the opportunity you're looking for, but what's important for a lot of people is that fourth opportunity. And then we also, other factors that people cared about, access to quality healthcare, safety, those kinds of things are also feathers in our caps as far as our
Yeah.
region goes.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah. Yeah, because I it's the same thing for us, right? We're originally from Chicago. I'm born and raised in Chicago, but during COVID, we sold our Chicago home and we had already had a home up here and we were coming, on the weekends and when we could, or maybe a week when we started working remote. But it was when we sold our home in Chicago and actually committed to coming here fully, all year round, that we started enjoying the pleasures of being here. And yes, we can be active all year round. And we're used to snow from Chicago. And so yeah, we really enjoy having the opportunities to I'm not a downhill skier, but I do love snowshoeing and cross country skiing. And yeah, we just enjoy a lot of fun with it. So yeah, I would like to get back into work. I feel like I'm too young to retire so early. So I just want to get back to work, and I've applied to several jobs. I've been turned down for many of them. I can go to a $15 an hour job, but I'm college educated. I have a degree in finance. I have a degree in mathematical programming. I was in sales for 30 years. Would love to go back into sales because it's just something that I know I love.
Hmm.
I love meeting new people. So it's just finding the right opportunity that's going to take somebody, that's of a little more mature age.
Hmm.
So that's interesting to hear some of these communities and challenges that are going on in the community. But at least they're working on it, right? They're working on the housing issue, and they're working on. I know that these have been discussions with the councils, the government councils, on what is needed, what are the challenges that we need to face.
Hmm.
So. All right, well, stay with us. The Larson Health Podcast will be right back. This episode is sponsored by LarsonHealthWeightLoss.com, your resource for anti inflammatory meal plans, mindset tools, and whole body wellness. So, Sam, many listeners may not realize how much local economies influence their health outcomes. Can you share practical examples of how economic health impacts personal wellness?
Yeah. So I kind of going back to the Sheboygan example at the start, I think that's a good shows that ripple out of how everything is connected. Obviously touched on the resources that come with having higher incomes or health insurance through your job, and connections to how that runs through. Um, and it's also, and this kind of bridges a little bit more from the economy to maybe the community side. It also goes into um, community design and community planning. I am by no means an urban or regional planner, but all the data that shows whether it's a walkable community and how that gets people outside and moving, whether you have parks and trails and walkways within your town and opportunities to get outside in close proximity. Increasingly, through the effects of climate change, we're seeing how communities are designed are leading to how building green space into communities is able to keep them cooler in the summer, because obviously concrete and building materials just kind of soak up heat.
Yeah.
So the more trees and you can have on a street, or green roofs you have in your community, can even help mitigate those larger fluctuations we're seeing in temperature now. So that kind of moves away from the economy side, but it gets more into the community design and planning.
Yeah.
But keeping your community cooler is especially important for larger people that are already at risk of different kind of heat related issues. And so that's huge. But also just having an inviting community that you can get out and walk and move in is really huge, for folks as well, because the last thing you want to do when you get home is, all right, I get home from work, I make dinner, I don't want to get in my car again to drive somewhere else to go do whatever. But if I can walk out my back door and get on a trail, or, Petoskey has the Greenway that runs through downtown where the old railroad tracks are, or
Yeah.
the Bear River recreation area where you can get out and walk along the river, and just move in general and have quick and easy access to that. The community planning, designing aspect, and that connection to personal wellness is huge.
It really is, and we have so many trails, right? And we got Tamba for the mountain biking trails. We have the outfield family Bluelands that have so many trails on them, or the just all the what is it? The trail system. I'm trying to think of all the nature. What the name of it
North
is?
Country Trail,
Yeah, there's the North Country Trail, but there's
or
also the
Little Traverse Conservancy.
yeah,
Are you
Little
thinking of,
Traverse
yeah.
Conservancy. That's it. Yeah. So I mean, there's just so many ways to get out there and enjoy. And then the bike route. I mean, it goes from Harbor Springs, I think, all the way to Charlevoix.
Yep, and that's just the Little Traverse Wheelway. That's run through the top of Michigan Trail Council. So you have Harbor Springs to Charlevoix. It gets off in Petoskey and it runs up through Alanson to Pellston to Mackinac City.
Wow.
They're working on the connection from Boyne City to Charlevoix. You have the North Central Trail that runs from Gaylord all the way up to Mackinac City.
Wow.
And so the ability to just get on, and whether you're a biker, whether you're a rollerblader, I don't think I could ever do it, but the Nordic skiers who have the little roller skis for them to train in the summer, I
Yes.
see them on the trail. So just any
Cool.
opportunity to get out and do that. And
Yeah.
economists talk about cost of illness savings. It's kind of this abstract number, but
Yeah.
it's trying to quantify the cost savings to both society and individuals
Yes.
for not being ill. So it's kind of hard to quantify like a null thing, but so showing that, okay, by having access to trails and access to these economic, or not these economic, these opportunities to get active, that we have higher health, we have better health outcomes, which then reduces overall economic burden.
Yeah.
The Michigan Office of Outdoor Recreation Industry has a cool data portal on their website where you can look at the cost of illness savings of different activities in the state. They did this
Cool.
huge survey data and compiled it. So what's the cost of illness savings of, running and hiking versus mountain biking or versus something else? And then you can even break it down by region. So for example, in Northwest Michigan, we have a higher share of people who are mountain biking and downhill skiing than downstate. So we
Okay.
have, better cost of illness savings for that than a different region in the state. But I'm a data nerd, so it's a great data
That's
portal to
cool.
dive in and try and
Yeah. I'm gonna check
show,
that out.
show the benefits that come from having access to these outdoor opportunities.
Yeah, because I'm trying to help people who have, metabolic diseases or need to lose weight. So this is a great area for them to do it. But obviously, they must all be going to. They're getting their donuts, they're getting their fast food that are, that's in the area, versus eating whole foods and teaching, teaching classes on how to read a food label so that you know what to look for, or talking about how to do a cooking class. So I'm working with Manna to provide cooking classes for, people who are in need of food, but how do they cook it? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
these people have no idea how to cook it. Maybe they're campers. Maybe they have a grill. Maybe they actually have an oven. Like how do they use it? How do they, so I think it's really interesting to see that you're right. People who have money, I mean, if you know how to read, you know how to read a cookbook. You know how to read a cookbook, you can cook for yourself. But a lot of these people don't even have a cookbook, and they're lucky if they even have a stove. So I think it's really interesting to see that this is even a challenge up here in northern Michigan, right, where you have multi-million-dollar homes, and then you have people who are craving to find a home, right? They're challenged to find something affordable, and I can tell you that services in northern Michigan are as expensive, or if not more, than what we found in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So, anybody who wants to get a service or go out to eat, it's as expensive or more expensive than Chicago. So obviously not New York or California, but any other place in the country is just as expensive up here. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. I'm right. I'm a female. Like I want to go get my hair done. It's more expensive up here to get my hair done. If I want to get a facial, I fly to Chicago. It's actually cheaper for me to fly to Chicago, get my facial done, and fly back, and it would still be less expensive than it would be here.
Wow.
It's just crazy. So what have you learned about the workforce well-being and retention in your role with NLEA and MSU Extension?
It's a good question. When it comes to retention, I'm going to make some broad generalizations, but I think the era of the relationship between the employer and the employee ending at the paycheck is, I think, past.
Okay.
I know a lot of people. I think a lot of people are looking for something more than just, okay, here's your paycheck, and that's the end of our relationship. Um, so I think we're seeing companies that are able to invest in their employees in other ways are having higher retention rates. And so there's some, pretty impressive stuff. Like Boyne Mountain has their own childcare center on campus. So childcare is obviously a huge issue in the community. So
Yeah. And
um,
Mana has something also, don't they? Mana
I
has
think
like
so.
a health coach or somebody who will advise them on proper eating and all that. Same thing with
Yeah,
Sutter Healthcare.
and so I think that's an example of investing in healthcare or investing in the health of your folks. Um, we work with, so many of the businesses we interact with are saying, okay, we can't find people, we're having issues. A different business that we interact with is like, we're not having a problem with that whatsoever, but they pay good wages, they offer health insurance, they offer profit sharing. So if the company does better, you do better. They also invest in their employees' education and build them a pathway within the company, which I think is huge. So it's not just we're hiring you as a welder, and okay, it's we're going to hire you as a welder, but in the next 2 years, you're going to work on this certificate. and then we're going to step you up to this position. And then in the next 2 years, you're going to work on this and we'll step you up. So they invest in their people that way. They've also done some really impressive stuff around healthcare. They negotiated an agreement with, they also invest in real estate with a doctor, primary care physician that rents space from them. So I think if you're an employee, you can get in to see a primary care physician within like 48 hours or something of having an appointment, which is huge. And then they also have I'm not sure what his official title is, but like counselor / success coach, who's shared between their different business units. Because what their business leader, I've heard him say, is that their theory is if you get more than 2 people in a room, there's going to be conflict about something. So this person just kind of goes between their different businesses and helps navigate conflict, but is also just a person for their employees to lean on if they're having issues in their personal life or at home. And so this company has really made an effort to invest in their employees, both financially, in their education, in their personal health and wellness. And yeah, they say, yeah, we don't have any issues attracting people. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's because you're doing all of these things. But so I think at large, folks or companies that are successful are kind of looking beyond just the paycheck to, what other ways can we support and invest in our employees?
I think that's amazing, because I mean, traditionally it's been, let's offer an HSA, let's offer some health insurance and a paycheck. But actually offering things around wellness and helping the employees get to a better place is such a great benefit to all employees, and I hope we're all taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and it can be little things like the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. We have a small wellness fund essentially each year. I think it's like maybe $200 or $300 an employee, where basically it is, are you buying a gym membership? Are you buying a new pair of running shoes? Are you just small amount, but hey, I bought,
It all helps.
whatever, that camping equipment that it's going to get me outside, get me active. And so just there can be small things like that are supportive of, investing in your employees and showing interest in them beyond just the labor that they provide you. And I think anything like that is where I see companies being successful, who are thinking kind of a little beyond the paycheck and health insurance and 401k. And that's the end of, that's the end of that.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. So how does youth engagement and sport, like your work with youth soccer, tie into building healthier communities?
This is a huge one, and I'll try not to use up all the remaining amount of our time. So yes, I help coach youth soccer for Petoskey Youth Soccer Association. It's a club I grew up playing at, and now get to help coach, which is really, really fun. Yeah, there's so much when it comes to health. So I think my mom was a physical education teacher for 30 years. So one of the things that she talks about is lifelong fitness. And so I think soccer is a sport. I'm 26 now. I'm still playing. We play pickup twice a week. I just did last week for down at Venetian Festival. They do a 3v3 tournament and they have an adult division. So my brother and 2 of our friends went down and played. So I think soccer is one of those sports that you can play throughout your life.
Throughout life, yes.
And it's, so I would say it's that lifelong fitness and physical health part of it. You also have the community and all the social skills and emotional development that come with playing in a team sport, which are boundless. I'm definitely not an expert to talk about, but yeah, whether it's developing friendships or just learning how to interact in a team and in a unit, I think is beneficial as well. And so giving kids that sense of community and belonging, I think is huge as well. I think, yeah, it's getting people outside. It's getting them that social interaction and connection to folks, and just bringing communities together in general. I look at Petoskey Parks and Rec runs a rec soccer program for like the real little kids, like 5, 6, and all the parents and siblings and grandparents that come out and are cheering kids on. And obviously, of all the kids that do that when they're 5 or 6, Not all of them are still going to be play soccer at the end of high school or in high school or even after, but I still think it's getting kids outside, it's getting them active, it's getting them socializing with other people.
Yes.
Um, Especially coming out of COVID for a lot of very young kids.
Yeah.
Um, Sports were their first interactions with folks, kind of outside of school. I have a friend who I went to college with who was helping coach some rec stuff in New York City. And so, I mean, he was helping like real little kids, but if you were like 2, 3 years old when kind of COVID started, and then, a year or two of remote, and all of a sudden you're like 5 or 6 and you haven't had as much of the social, development as other kids, stepping into a little soccer team is a huge step for them. So I think that the social aspect of team sports can often get overlooked beyond the physical, but I think those two tie together really nicely as far as building a healthier community at large.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's wonderful that, I mean, you grew up playing soccer. Now you're teaching soccer to youth, and it does really build community. And, for somebody who just moved up here 2 years ago, full time, or a little less than 2 years, I knew that I needed to take initiative to build community, right? Because I had it in Chicago. I was born and raised there, right? So I already had
Mhm.
it going to school and working. And so, yeah, so working to join the women's golf group, join the community, the Harbor Springs Chamber of Commerce, the Petoskey Chamber of Commerce, become an ambassador, volunteer at the movie theater, uh, join, did I say book club, the golf league, the women's golf club. I mean, there's just so many different things you can do. And then Impact 100, I don't know if you've heard of that group.
Yeah.
So just different groups of meeting different people and building those relationships with them. And obviously it takes time, and it takes, you got to be consistent.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. Yeah, the consistency is huge, but also I think, and obviously it's a benefit and a privilege to be, able-bodied and have these kinds of things. But I look at like one of my girlfriend's friends is huge she plays volleyball. Grew up playing volleyball, and there's a group that meets I think once or twice a week and plays sand volleyball in Petoskey. And yes, it can be quite daunting to show up and join the group and be on the outside for that. And we have new people come and join kind of our pickup group for soccer. But if you're able to kind of overcome that initial, I could be a bit of an anxious person, but I'm walking into this new group. It's a group that you automatically have at least one thing in common with. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I like soccer, you like soccer too, because we're here. Okay, that's our first. And so then you can chat, and odds are if you're still playing soccer as an adult, it's okay. Did you play in high school? Did you play in college somewhere? Like, so you have a couple questions that you can ask people to bond right away. And so, I know there's the volleyball group that happens. There used to be a women's soccer league in Petoskey. I'm not sure if it's still going on. But having that kind of, it's nice to have that one immediate thing that I know we have in common,
Yeah.
and then kind of building from that.
Yeah, I agree. So what are some of the most common barriers you see communities facing becoming more vibrant and resilient?
Obviously, top one is resources and capacity, especially in rural communities. We're benefit in our area. We benefit from high net worth individuals that vacation and hold property here, and so we do have maybe higher tax revenues than comparable communities in other parts of the state. So part of it is just money, for lack of a better word. And then the other side of it, going back to talent, what we were talking about earlier, is capacity. Do we actually have the person on staff who has the capacity and isn't pulled in 10 and 12 different directions to take on whatever new initiative, we want to talk about? So, City of Petoskey recently launched, can't think of the name, but like a youth advisory council, where it's kind of middle school and high school students who get to learn about city and local government, but then also kind of be a sounding board for the council and professional staff to be, okay, we want to engage more with young people, or we want to get more young people to these kind of events. What can we do? And so I think that's a great initiative, and it'll build a more vibrant and resilient community. But you have to have someone who's got the time on staff to say, yep, I'm going to, engage in that. I think one of the other challenges is silos, people kind of missing the interconnectedness of
Yeah.
everything. So, okay, I only work in, city government, or I only work in the private sector, or I only work in, this sector, and not necessarily seeing the interconnectedness of things. In our region, it can also be geographical silos. So the NLEA works across 4 counties, and
Yeah.
part of the reason it's important, or I would make the case it's important to have a regional entity, is how interconnected our economies are. So if you look at our region, about 30% or 1/3 of workers live in a different county than they work.
Okay.
So I live in Emmett County. Our offices are in Charlevoix, or are in
Okay.
Boyne City, are in Charlevoix County.
Okay.
So when I go to the office, I'm driving across county lines to go to work. And so that's why, we can tend to get, especially on the local government side, it's okay, I'm responsible for my pocket. This is the geographical boundary, which is important. That's the community you're responsible for.
Yeah.
But it's also important to see the larger play. So using Daifuku as an example, Daifuku Jervis Webb, a large manufacturer, they used to have 3 or 4 manufacturing facilities that were spread across Emmett and Charlevoix County. And about 4 or 5 years ago, they consolidated all of those into one facility in Boyne City. They built a brand new $20 million manufacturing facility. It is crazy impressive. They do build really cool stuff there. But if I put my Emmett County hat on for a second, it's, well, those jobs left our county, you know.
Yeah.
But if you kind of put your regional cap on for a second and say, okay, Daifuku is a global corporation. They could have taken that $20 million check and built a factory anywhere in the world.
Anywhere else. Yeah.
They chose to invest here. Yes, now some people are going to have to commute further, or they're going to decide, that commute's no longer worth it to me. But that's still a large manufacturer employing over 100 folks in our region,
Yeah.
many of who are going to travel across county lines to get to that business.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think it's important to kind of break down some of those silos and see how, things connect. And especially with housing now, a housing development in one community is going to benefit everybody in the region because we just need housing in general. People are going to be traveling across the county lines, but also, one thing a healthy housing market needs is movement. So people moving from the apartment who then are able to move into their first home, which opens up the apartment for me to move into. So I'm no longer living with my parents.
Yes.
And so having, movement at large in a housing market is important as well. So kind of breaking down those. So to wrap my very long answer up, common barriers, financial, the money side of things, capacity for staff and folks who have time to dedicate to, engaging initiatives. And then the third, I was going to say, is silos, whether it's in your sector or in your geography, but kind of breaking down those so people can see how communities and economies are interconnected to then work together to become more vibrant and resilient.
True that. So you're listening to the Larson Health Podcast with Sam Bailey. Visit larsonhealthweightloss.com for wellness resources and real food healing guides. So Sam, you've helped organize initiatives like the Economic Symposium. What kinds of conversations are happening there that impact everyday people in your region?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those that don't know, the Economic Symposium is an event hosted by the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. It's every May, and it is a gathering of private and public sector leaders from across the region and across the state. We get a lot of our state level elected folks there, and we dive into economic and community vitality, and we pick a different theme each year. So last year was innovation. Oh wait, no, that was 2 years ago. So innovation, that was 2 years ago, was innovation. But yeah, so innovation. So what makes companies able to build a culture, to create that new product, to develop that patent, to solve that problem for their client. And on the flip side, for communities, what's that new initiative we've got coming online? So this past year, we were talking about planning for the future. So oftentimes in our work, you can get stuck up in the day-to-day. So taking that step back to look long-term. So we had a couple business CEOs, regional CEOs come in and talk about, what are the indicators that they're looking to for their business for planning 5, 10 years out. And obviously for C-suite folks, that's affecting everybody that works under them. We had local developers and a few community leaders come in one of the breakout sessions and talk about housing developments. So it can take a long time for the idea of a housing development to happen to when folks are actually moving in.
Yes.
Because whether you got to tackle zoning challenges, whether you got to tackle infrastructure to make sure they have a big enough water and sewer line to get to that property, then you've got to deal with the actual constructing or permitting and then construction. Then there's the financing of it all. And so that's a really long-term
And then
project.
marketing it. Yeah.
Yes. And so while these are just a couple examples of conversations that happen there, we really try and make sure that we're having conversations that ripple out. And through the breakout sessions, folks can engage in a bunch of different things. So I think the housing one is a perfect example of that's affecting everybody. This year we had the state demographer come and talk about those long-term population trends that I mentioned at the start. She was breaking it down by the region of how is the age makeup of our region shifting? What does that mean for our workforce? How is our total population changing? What does that mean for our infrastructure? And so any one of those conversations happening at symposium is going to ripple out, and it's about a topic that's impacting everybody.
So true. So what small steps can communities take to begin revitalizing themselves, even with limited resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot that folks can do. I think early on, it's laying groundwork. So it might be doing some asset mapping of, okay, what are the assets we have in our community? And it could be the community assets. If we have great parks, we have great trails, we have access to the water. Okay, that's a strength we have. Let's lean into it. It could be, okay, we have sewer and water capacity in our community. That means we could take on a housing development or maybe a larger manufacturer. So figuring out what assets you have in your community, and that might be a strength you can play to, but that also might point out a gap in your community of, okay, one thing we don't have a lot of in our region is industrial zoned land for companies to expand. So we have a lot of manufacturers up here that have plans to expand either on their site or build a larger facility, and they want to do that in the next 5 years, but there's not a lot of inventory around for them. Or maybe there's a piece of land, but it doesn't have the electrical capacity they need or the water capacity that they need. And so it might identify a gap for you. So kind of that asset mapping is one thing. Another is talking about the silos I mentioned earlier is, finding those connected points between maybe different departments in local government or different nonprofits that support entrepreneurs and business owners. And so maybe trying to develop, I don't want to say a step-by-step guide, but kind of maybe a living document that is, if someone says, hey, I want to start a business and this is my idea and I want to do it here. Okay, well, you have to go to the building department to do, planning and zoning for that site. And then you got to connect to this organization to help get some financing for it. And then you connect with the NLEA to help with this. And you connect. So it can be very confusing for the person that has a vested interest and wants to start the business or wants to do a housing development, or maybe they're a business owner and they have the second floor of their downtown building is vacant. And they say, you know what, I might want to put some apartments up there so we have some workforce housing. So who do they have to talk to that? So even just developing a bit of a living document so it can become a little less confusing for that person who has this idea and has this interest and wants to help their community, but they got to go in 30 different directions to do that. So having that in one place to maybe help guide that person, I think is a huge step.
I agree, but it does take a community, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you personally stay motivated and aligned with your mission in community work?
It's a great question. How do I personally stay motivated and aligned with my mission? I think for me, the motivation is really when going back to earlier when I mentioned the engagement people get to when I get to put numbers in
Yeah.
front of them. And that is by far the most rewarding aspect of my work. When I get to go in front of the city council, or when I get to go in front of a nonprofit or the Rotary Club or whoever and start talking about, okay, here's how our labor force is changing, or here's how our housing market is evolving. And the way people lean in and start asking questions and start, really engaging with it is really rewarding. And so there's that self, it feels good inside, but also I think as far as to have a positive impact in the community, we need to understand what's happening in the community. And so, especially coming out of COVID, there's this mantra of, oh, everyone's on unemployment. No one wants to work anymore. And then I can step
Is
in and
that
go, okay,
true?
no. So I can step in and say, okay, actually, the number of people on unemployment in our counties is about the same or lower than what it was before COVID. So actually, this labor force challenge we're running into is this larger demographic challenge that's been happening for 10, 20 years. So we got to understand the problem if we're going to solve it. So I think it's really rewarding to step in and kind of lay that groundwork. The NLEA isn't here to tell each community exactly what to do to solve their problems and have everyone look the same. Every community is going to have a different vision for themselves and their economy. But making sure we're all kind of starting at the same point, and to then tackle the problem. When talking about labor force, for economists, talk about prime age population. So that generally refers to folks 25 to 54. These
Okay.
are individuals that have more likely to have completed their schooling and be fully engaged in the workforce. As you start to get 55, people are looking for maybe that semi-retirement or starting to look to phase out a little bit.
Seems young though, right?
Yeah, but this is also a demographic that is more likely to take out a loan to buy a home, more likely to start a business, more likely to start a family. And so
Okay.
this is kind of a larger demographic that economists look to of like, okay, you got to have a healthy portion of your population in this demographic.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to start running into some challenges. So
And
if you look at the,
does Northern Michigan have a population like that?
we do, but so the state between 2010 and 2023, the state of Michigan, that demographic declined by about 7%.
Oh,
And like I said, there's larger demographic. We're an aging nation as a whole. But if you look at our region specifically, we lost 13.6% of that demographic.
wow.
So nearly twice the rate of the state.
Yeah.
And so there's been some growth in recent years coming out of COVID, like I mentioned kind of at the start, where we're seeing slight growth, but there's still this larger trend. So, when people are like, everyone's on unemployment, no one wants to work anymore, it's like, no, we've got some larger challenges at play that we've got to figure out how to address. But
So what are they working on to do that? Yeah.
first we got to agree that that's an issue. Part of it is housing stock. People are going to move to where they can afford. So part of it's that. Part of it's that narrative change that I mentioned at the start of people got to see their opportunities here. Yeah, we're known for our quality of life in the region, but making sure that people can also see the economic opportunities that exist here as well. And we're starting
That
to do a
there's
little bit.
housing, that there's jobs, that there's, yeah, all of that.
Mhm. And so, we're not going to convince everybody to move here, and that's fine. I like living in a rural area, but those people who are maybe thinking about it, um, allowing them to see themselves here and see that opportunity. So that's an example of like, yes, it's rewarding to put numbers in front of people and see them engage, but also be able to lay like, okay, this is a real challenge that we're facing.
Yeah.
So let's have a conversation about how to fix it. But first, we got to agree on that baseline, what's happening in our community.
And that it actually is a challenge. So
Yes.
this segment of the Larson Health Podcast is brought to you by LarsonHealthWeightLoss.com, where mindset meets nutrition and real life healing. So, Sam, what does living a purpose driven life look like for you today?
Wow. It's the deep question of the podcast so far. I would say for me, growing up, I knew I wanted to have a job that allowed me to positively impact the world around me. Um, I didn't want to just like work a job and then feel like I'm getting I don't say have to volunteer, but like only feel like I'm having an impact outside of work. So I was able to find a job that did that for me. But also, finding ways to give back. I love coaching. I think about all the coaches that shaped who I was as a player, but also like who I am as a person. And so I think I really enjoy finding that opportunity to give back in that way. I'm working on my master's degree right now, so I've had to step back a bit from coaching because working full time and going to
And
grad
getting
school
masters.
and
Yeah.
coaching would have been a bit much. But so I'm only coaching. I'm not leading a team myself. I'm just kind of helping out one night a week. But
Okay.
it's still that opportunity to give back and see that light bulb moment for a kid where and then so they suddenly get that technique right, or they get that tactic right on the field, and you kind of see that light bulb moment and they go, oh, this works, like I like this. And so it's finding ways to have that positive impact is what I know I wanted, both in my professional and my personal life. I think is what I strive to do.
So, what myths about economic development and rural vitality would you like to debunk for listeners?
Ooh, what myths are out there? That's a good question. um
Yeah, do you hear of anything that is like, people believe one thing, but it's really not true?
Well, I think I've kind of touched a bit about that on the numbers already of like, oh, no one wants to work anymore. Well, actually, we have these larger issues at work. I think,
That's true. So you show the data on things that people think one way, but your data proves something else.
yeah, so I think that's important, but um, I think maybe, and this is in general of, there's increasing discussions of around the role of the public sector in supporting private sector development, especially at the state level when it comes to grants to businesses and that kind of stuff. So there's this argument that, um, you know, well, those are tax dollars. We shouldn't be helping private sector. We shouldn't be choosing winners and losers, that kind of thing. And there's definitely valid criticism in that, and I agree with it to a point. But also, I think it's just a reality that we've get the public and the private sector have to work together if we're going to have opportunities. The business is going to need a sewer line. They're going to need a water line. They're going to need something to. So using that Daifuku facility as example, $20 million factory just outside Boyne City in the township. Well, they have to have a fire suppression system in that factory, and it's
Okay.
huge. They can't run that on just a well. They've got to have a connection to a municipal water system. So the NLEA helped kind of make an agreement between the city of Boyne City, the township, and Daifuku to help run a water line out there. But then some of the tax value from that property has got to go back to the city to help maintain that water line. And
Okay.
so that's a really concrete example, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But a factory just can't snap their fingers and put up their own water system, tomorrow. So I think for substantive economic, whether it's housing development or a business development in our region, there's going to have to be some kind of collaboration between the public and the private sector, especially now as costs go up for everything. Tax abatements, which don't abate old taxes. It's only new tax value. So the tax value is still going up. Locals are still pulling in higher tax value. It's just not going up as much. They're going to say, hey, we're
Yeah.
going to help you out for a couple years. We're going to abate these new taxes, and then you get to invest that money in your business. Taxes will still go up at the end of it. The local unit can put benchmarks in and say, okay, we're going to give this tax abatement, but we want to see 5 new jobs. So I think any development in our region is going to take some collaboration between the public and private
Absolutely.
sector to really get it across the finish line.
I agree. So, Sam, finally, what's next for you in your mission to build a thriving community?
It's a great question. I would say for me, part of it's working on my master's degree. I'm getting a master's in public policy,
Okay.
so I can help communities kind of analyze what are the implications of different policy decisions they make. And another thing we're working on, both me personally in my master's, but also what the NLA is working on, is a lot of my current work with data is historical. So what's the trend line from the past to the present? We're looking at some new data tools, and also I'm working on my master's program, but being able to look forward. And so not just, okay, what got us here, but if you do X or if you do Y as a community, what are some of the future implications of that? And I think that'll be really important to, you know, help build thriving communities, because it's one thing to understand how you got here, but you also need to understand your options looking forward.
I
And so
agree.
I think that's something I'm really looking forward to, building that skill set personally and also getting the tools to help do that for communities. So we can't just have informed discussions about the present, but we can also have informed discussions about the future.
That's exciting. So, Sam,
Thank
thank
you.
you for sharing your insights on building healthy, vibrant communities. Your work reminds us that wellness extends beyond our personal choices. It's deeply connected to the communities we shape and the opportunities we create for each other. So, to our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, remember your involvement matters, whether it's in your family, your neighborhood, or region. You have the power to build spaces that support wellness and purpose. Visit LarsonHealthWeightLoss.com for wellness resources and mindset support that help you step into the life you desire. Until next time, nourish your body, transform your mind, and live with purpose. You can reach Sam Bailey at NLEA, the NLEA.com. Sam Bailey's on LinkedIn or YouTube, Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So, what'd you think?